The Galactic Empire did not arrive with fire in the sky or weapons blazing. They arrived with silence, inevitability, and arrogance. Their ships drifted into Earth's orbit like vultures, metallic predators poised against a prey they considered beneath them. Humanity had always been underestimated. The galaxy saw them as chaotic, unrefined, loud creatures who could never unite, who fought as much against each other as against their enemies. But the Empire made one fatal miscalculation. They believed they could take what they wanted from humans without consequence. They believed the price of theft would be silence. They did not understand that for humans, blood ties were not negotiable. On the northern fringes of a colony, 3 young girls were taken. They were not soldiers. They were not leaders. They were simply daughters, laughing only hours before in the safety of home. Imperial storm squads moved through the settlement with clinical efficiency, pushing aside resistance with precision fire and energy blades. The colonists shouted, resisted, bled, and fell. They were ignored, crushed beneath the weight of an empire that saw no value in individual life. For the soldiers, it was routine. A sweet. A harvest. Children loaded onto a transport, faces pale, eyes wide, cries muffled by the hum of containment fields. The ship rose into the sky and was gone, leaving behind burning roofs and shattered families most empires believed they could take and break without repercussion. They counted on fear. Fear was the tool that chained worlds. Fear was the reason countless species lay docile under imperial boots. But humanity had never been guided by fear. Grief, rage, defiance, those were their currencies. And when grief and rage burned inside the wrong person, the galaxy learned what kind of monsters humans could become. The abduction did not go unnoticed. The news carried quickly through smuggler channels, mercenary whispers, resistance bands. And every whisper carried a name. Baba Yaga. The name was not official. It was never spoken in the Empire's records. But soldiers in dark outposts muttered it when they drank, intelligence officers exchanged glances when the name surfaced in intercepted transmissions, mercenaries swore they'd never take contracts against her. She was a ghost, a myth, a story told to explain slaughtered squads and vanished fleets. Humans called her an operator, a survivor of wars the galaxy had never catalogued. Aliens called her a witch. But all understood one truth: when the name Baba Yaga surfaced, death followed. She had once been human like any other, flesh and blood, bound by laws and oaths. She had fought in wars, had bled in forgotten jungles and frozen wastelands, had carved her legend in operations the galaxy never recorded. And then she vanished. No one knew why. Some said she had grown tired of war. Some said she was hunted and forced into hiding. The truth was simpler. She had found something worth more than fighting. She had daughters. She had laid her weapons aside to give them peace. But peace had been stolen. When word reached her of the abduction, something in her shifted. 4 years she had walked as a shadow of who she once was, content to disappear. But with the loss of her girls, the shadow gave way to fire. The part of her the galaxy had feared was not dead. It had only been sleeping. And now it was awake. The Empire thought it had taken 3 helpless children. What it had taken was her blood. And for that crime, she would bring ruin. She was not alone in her wrath. Beside her was a creature, small to the untrained eye, yet infamous on Earth for its defiance of reason itself. The honey badger. It was not an ordinary animal. Generations of breeding, genetic splicing, and harsh training had turned it into something more. Its instincts were raw violence, its body a compact engine of destruction. Every predator feared it. Every prey envied its endurance. It had no sense of retreat. No sense of defeat. Plasma fire, blades, venom, traps, it ignored them all in the single-minded pursuit of tearing apart whatever stood before it. Baba Yaga called it her partner. The galaxy would come to know it as her executioner. The Empire laughed when they first heard rumors of her moving. Soldiers mocked the stories. Commanders dismissed the chatter. A woman and a beast meant nothing against dreadnoughts and legions. Yet beneath the arrogance, unease began to spread. Reports of stockpiles of weapons disappearing, of patrols vanishing without a trace, of signals cut off mid-scream. And in every whispered rumor, one detail remained the same: her oath. She would tear apart the stars if needed, one ship at a time, until she found her daughters. The galaxy had always feared humanity's capacity for violence, but it had dismissed it as undisciplined chaos. What it did not understand was the deeper truth: violence, for humans, was not random. It was adaptive. It was personal. Humans fought for reasons other species could not comprehend. For territory, for survival, for freedom, but most of all for family. A threat to blood was a threat that no human would forgive. And Baba Yaga was not an ordinary human. She was the embodiment of that principle. The first warnings came from smugglers who claimed to have seen her move through black markets, acquiring old war gear with quiet precision. She paid not with money, but with promises, threats, and favors that carried the weight of inevitability. Weapons once thought useless were reforged into instruments of slaughter. Scrap metal became mines. Chemicals became poisons. Every fragment of trash became a weapon in her hands. She needed no fleet. She needed no army. She was an army. The Empire's arrogance was its undoing. They dismissed her as one more rebel, a problem to be crushed when convenient. They failed to realize what was rising against them. The abducted daughters were not simply children. They were the trigger that pulled humanity's darkest instincts into the light. The Empire had dealt with human soldiers, with human colonies, with human diplomacy. But it had never dealt with one human mother who swore vengeance, and so the whispers grew. Mercenary captains abandoned imperial contracts, unwilling to hunt a woman whose legend included entire crews butchered in silence. Alien prisoners began to mutter prayers to her name, believing she was more than mortal. Imperial officers scoffed in public but carried unease in private. Every soldier understood that death was part of war. But the kind of death she brought was different. It was personal. It was intimate. She did not kill because she had to. She killed because someone had taken from her, and she would not stop until balance was restored. When her preparations were complete, when her partner snarled at her side and the first blood had been spilled, she sent a single message across the void. It was not a demand. It was not a threat. It was a statement. They had taken her 3 girls. And she was coming for them. The galaxy that had once dismissed humanity as loud and reckless finally began to understand. Loudness was not the danger. Recklessness was not the threat. The true terror of humanity lay in the cold, calculated wrath of a single human who had been wronged, and as she moved into the darkness of space, shadows following, whispers echoing, the Empire felt the first chill of fear. Not of armies. Not of fleets. But of a story they had dismissed as myth. Baba Yaga was awake. And with her walked the killer honey badger. Together they were not soldiers. They were extinction wrapped in flesh. And the galaxy had no idea what storm had just been unleashed. The Empire believed the opening strikes to be random acts of vengeance, a scattering of raids by desperate humans seeking symbolic victories. They underestimated the precision of what was happening. Convoys that supplied their fleets found themselves targeted in ways no alien strategist could predict. Hyperlanes once considered secure were mined with devices that did not exist in any database. Entire sectors were isolated as communications satellites went silent. But the true weapon was not firepower. It was fear. The husband of the Baba Yaga never announced himself in the open. He did not broadcast demands or issue declarations of war. He operated in silence, letting absence speak. Where a patrol vanished, rumors filled the void. Where a garrison failed to report in, whispers spread faster than official communiques. Aliens told themselves it was coincidence that the Empire remained unchallenged. But fear erodes faster than stone under acid, and even the most disciplined soldiers began to tremble at shadows. For the first time in generations, the Empire fought an enemy that refused to play by its rules. Their war doctrines were built on overwhelming force, numerical supremacy, and intimidation. They expected frontal assaults, desperate last stands, and enemy retreats. Instead, they faced an adversary who fought like smoke appearing where least expected, choking them in silence, vanishing before a counterstrike could land. Supply lines were bled until fleets starved in place. Planetary governors awoke to assassinations in their own fortified palaces. Commanders learned to fear sleep, for some never woke again. The husband's hand was everywhere, but never seen. In time, survivors began to speak of him in names borrowed from humanity's own ancient myths. Deathless. Koschei. A man who could not be killed, who always returned, who turned certainty into ash. Alien recruits were told he was only a story, propaganda designed to rattle them. But even the most loyal officers felt doubt creep into their hearts. A myth did not erase an entire armada overnight. A story did not destroy worlds without open bombardment. Something more was moving against them, and it carried the vengeance of 99 million dead. What unsettled the Empire most was how quickly humans adapted. Within months, new fleets rolled out of shipyards faster than any model predicted. Engineers who had once built commercial freighters designed warships optimized for ambush and mobility. Civilians volunteered in such overwhelming numbers that the armed forces turned them away. Every setback only hardened humanity further. Their grief had crystallized into something implacable. This was no mere war of territory. This was a blood feud that would not end until one side ceased to exist. The husband's strategies reflected that truth. He knew humans could not match the Empire ship for ship, world for world. To attempt it would mean extinction. Instead, he made every weakness into a weapon. Humans were adaptable in environments that broke other species. They fought in vacuum with improvised gear, survived radiation leaks long enough to sabotage reactors, endured acceleration forces that would kill alien pilots. Their biology itself became a tool of war. Alien commanders could not predict tactics born of desperation, because no other species dared them. Humans not only dared, they thrived in them. The campaign spread like infection. In the outer colonies of the Empire, defectors began to appear. Some alien species had quietly admired humanity's defiance even before the war. Now they saw an opportunity. Secret channels opened. Supplies disappeared from imperial depots and reappeared in human hands. Minor species, long crushed under the Empire's dominance, whispered of rebellion. The husband never courted them openly, but his shadow gave them courage. If the Deathless could stand against the Empire, so could they. Alien high command grew desperate. They assembled larger and larger fleets to hunt him, diverting resources from their conquests. Entire sectors were stripped of defenses in order to muster overwhelming force. Yet every time, they struck at empty space. When they returned, they found their own worlds destabilized, their governments collapsing into chaos. The husband's genius was not in firepower. It was in inevitability. He never attacked where they were strong. He attacked where their strength left them blind. The legends grew darker. Survivors told stories of battles where hundreds of ships simply vanished, no wreckage, no survivors, only silence. Others swore that human ships appeared inside secure systems without traveling known jump lanes, as if the laws of physics bent under his command. Some claimed to see him in person, a man who fought hand-to-hand in the vacuum of space, who killed alien officers with his bare hands, who walked away unscathed while fleets burned around him. Truth mattered little. The myth was stronger. The Empire had created a figure larger than life, and their soldiers believed it. Morale cracked. Soldiers began to desert. Colonies refused imperial orders, fearing they would be the next sacrifice in a war their overlords no longer seemed certain of winning. Even among the ruling council of the Empire, panic grew. They had destroyed 99 million humans to prove their supremacy. Now, that number had become a curse, a reminder that they had awakened something far worse than expansionist colonists. They had awakened the husband of the Baba Yaga, and with him, the death knell of their dominion. Human fleets advanced sector by sector, not through brute force but through collapse. They left behind not conquered worlds, but liberated systems that now pledged themselves willingly to Earth. These were not alliances sealed by treaties, but bonds forged in fear of the alternative. Better to stand with humans than to face the Deathless alone. Alien generals attempted one last gambit: propaganda. They spread false reports of his death, claiming his flagship had been destroyed, his body vaporized. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. Then, days later, an imperial fleet of 400 ships was erased in a single night. Survivors crawled back with the same story. He had been there, at the center of it, unkillable, inevitable, deathless. The whisper became a roar. Koschei cannot die. The husband of the Baba Yaga is eternal. Kill 1 million of his people, and he will take 10 million of yours. Erase his colonies, and he will erase your civilization. For every atrocity, there is no balance, only vengeance multiplied. The empire had sown genocide. Now it harvested terror. Its commanders could not fight what they could not understand, and their soldiers no longer believed victory possible. Across the galaxy, smaller powers watched with fascination and dread. Humanity, once dismissed as dangerous but containable, had become something else entirely. They were not just a warrior race. They were a force of nature, unleashed through grief and vengeance, made manifest through one man's relentless will. By the time the Empire realized the truth, it was too late. Their war machine was not bleeding. It was rotting from within. Supplies could not move without ambush. Fleets could not gather without scattering in panic. Commanders could not inspire troops who already believed they were fighting the undead. Humanity did not need numbers. They only needed inevitability. And inevitability wore a human face. The galaxy waited for what would come next. If the first strikes had been vengeance, and the growing campaign was erosion, then the next step could only be annihilation. The Empire's core systems whispered prayers to gods long abandoned, for they understood the message now. The 99 million dead had not been forgotten. The dead was being collected, piece by piece, soul by soul, until nothing of the Empire remained, and at the center of it all stood the man they could not kill, the husband of the Baba Yaga, the Deathless, the myth made flesh. His silence spoke louder than any broadcast. His shadow carried heavier than any fleet. Where he moved, empires crumbled, and where he looked, civilizations held their breath. The galaxy was learning the cost of awakening humanity's wrath, and the price was only beginning to be paid. The Empire gathered its strength for what it declared would be the final stand. 4 months, it recalled fleets from distant frontiers, stripped garrisons from conquered worlds, and summoned every warship capable of flight. Never before had such an armada been assembled. Thousands of ships massed at the edge of their core territories, a wall of firepower designed to crush humanity once and for all. To the galaxy, it was a show of might. To the humans, it was an opportunity. The husband of the Baba Yaga studied the data in silence. Where others saw invincibility, he saw fragility. The concentration of power meant emptiness elsewhere. It meant desperation. It meant the Empire no longer believed it could hold by fear alone. He did not smile, but those who stood near him felt the air grow colder. The Empire had placed all its faith in numbers, and he had already shown that numbers meant nothing against inevitability. When the armada moved, humanity did not counter with equal force. They struck like lightning into systems left undefended, cutting supply lines, erasing communications relays, isolating the massive fleet from its lifelines. Alien admirals tried to maintain cohesion, but their ships grew restless. Without steady resupply, without reliable information, an armada of thousands became a starving horde adrift in space. The Deathless had forced them into a prison of their own strength. Then, when the pressure reached breaking point, the humans revealed what they had kept hidden. 4 years, their scientists had pushed beyond conventional technology, experimenting on the edges of what the galaxy considered possible. The husband unleashed it all at once. Warships that moved unpredictably through folded space, weapons that bypassed shields entirely, countermeasures that turned the Empire's strongest ordnance against itself. To the aliens, it looked as if physics itself had betrayed them. Their fleets disintegrated under the onslaught. In the chaos of the largest battle ever fought, the husband did not remain distant. He was present, commanding not from safety but from the heart of conflict. He led boarding actions into the most fortified vessels, striking down commanders in personal combat. Survivors reported seeing him walking through fire, his armor broken, his body bloodied, yet his advance unstoppable. To them, the stories were no longer exaggeration. He was not a man. He was the embodiment of vengeance itself. As the Empire's armada shattered, rebellions erupted across their territories. Species long oppressed saw their chance and rose in open revolt. Colonies declared independence overnight. Governors were assassinated by their own people. The Empire's ability to project power collapsed. Entire sectors that had once lived under unshakable rule now slipped from their grasp in weeks. The center could no longer hold, but the husband was not finished. He drove deeper, past the broken fleets and failing defenses, into the very heart of the empire. Planet by planet, he dismantled their command structure. Worlds that had celebrated the massacre of humans found themselves purged. Cities burned not in rage but in deliberate justice. No atrocity was forgotten, no participant spared. Yet those who had resisted the empire, those who had refused to take part in the slaughter, found humanity's wrath bypassing them. Mercy was not absent, but it was calculated. Allies could be forged from the oppressed. The guilty, however, would be erased. The rulers of the empire, who had once broadcast triumphs across the stars, now hid behind their walls. Their palaces were ringed by loyal guards, their worlds turned into fortresses. But walls meant nothing to the Deathless. He penetrated their defenses one by one, carving through fleets, dismantling armies, crushing any attempt at negotiation. The day came when he stood within their grand chamber, the council that had ordered the genocide of 99 million humans cowering before him. They tried to speak of treaties, of compromise, of shared peace. He listened without expression, and when they finished, he delivered judgment not in speeches, but in silence. His weapon was drawn, and one by one, they fell. No trial, no chance for mercy. Only the weight of 99 million voices demanding blood, with the empire's rulers dead, the structure that had bound thousands of worlds together collapsed. The once mighty dominion fractured into pieces, each scrambling for survival, each fearful of drawing humanity's eye. Some begged for alliance. Others retreated into isolation. Many simply surrendered, offering their fleets and their worlds as tribute. The war that had begun with the slaughter of millions ended with the shattering of an empire that had stood for centuries, but humanity did not seek to replace what it had destroyed. The husband made it clear Earth had no interest in ruling the galaxy. They did not need thrones or crowns. They needed deterrence. They needed to make the truth eternal, so that no power would ever again consider genocide against their kind. The message was carried across every channel, every frequency, every relay in the known galaxy. His voice was calm, steady, devoid of emotion. For every human life taken, we will take 1,000,000. For every world burned, we will erase a civilization. We do not forgive. We do not forget. If you harm one of us, you will answer to all of us. And if you doubt this truth, ask the ashes of the empire that thought itself eternal. The broadcast was not long. It did not need to be. Across the stars, alien species listened in silence. Some trembled in fear, others in awe. A few dared to wonder if humanity had become something more than mortal. The Deathless had broken the greatest power the galaxy had ever known. What else was beyond his reach? From that day forward, the myth became unshakable. Among humans, the husband of the Baba Yaga was remembered not for glory, but for necessity. He had done what no one else could. He had ensured survival. Among aliens, his legend became eternal. Entire academies of strategy were founded on the study of his campaign, yet none could replicate it. How do you counter inevitability? How do you fight an enemy who turns every weakness into strength? How do you kill a man who cannot die? In the years that followed, no empire dared move against humanity. Where once they had been tolerated, even dismissed, they were now untouchable. Colonies expanded freely, alliances grew, and the species that had nearly been erased now stood as the most feared presence in the galaxy. Yet even as prosperity returned, the shadow of the Deathless remained. He was not seen often, but he did not need to be. His existence was reminder enough. Alien children grew up hearing the stories. Parents warned them that if they misbehaved, the husband of the Baba Yaga would come for them. Soldiers whispered his name before battles, fearing they might face him. Leaders shaped their policies not by ambition, but by caution, always asking themselves, what would humanity do if provoked? And so the galaxy lived in a fragile peace, not born of goodwill, but of terror. 99 million humans had been the price of awakening a force that could not be contained. The empire that once ruled with an iron fist was gone, its ashes scattered across the stars, its memory serving as warning. In quiet moments, some dared to ask if the humans had lost something in their vengeance. Had they unleashed a monster even they could not control? Had the husband of the Baba Yaga become more than human, a weapon too great to ever rust? But those questions were never spoken aloud for long. Fear silenced them. Fear, and the certainty that if he still walked among the stars, then the galaxy had only one choice, never again. Thus, humanity endured. Not as conquerors, not as tyrants, but as a people who had shown the universe the price of underestimating them. A people who had taken tragedy and forged it into a weapon sharper than any blade, stronger than any fleet. A people who had proven that in the endless code of the cosmos, nothing was more dangerous than grief sharpened into vengeance, and at the center of it all, in whispers and in shadows, remained the husband of the Baba Yaga, the Deathless, the nightmare given flesh, the man who had broken an empire to avenge 99 million souls.